Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ernie Broughton. I'm a senior advisor for the Ethics and Compliance Initiative, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the May Best Practice Forum, Supercharging Ethics and Compliance Communication. And you know, communication is so important in the jobs that we do. The real estate that people have mentally to absorb critical information is so small that it's really important for us to supercharge our communications, to make it effective, to make it sticky. And we've got a great program for you that will showcase a number of initiatives from CHS, from Lockheed Martin, and we'll have our first session from Rethink. And it's my pleasure to introduce Andrea Falcioni. Andrea is an attorney with 25 years of legal and compliance experience. She also was a solutions leader at PwC. And she'll be joined by Tricia Cornell, the principal and head of creative services at Rethink, and focusing on journalism, advertising, social media, technology, and strategy. And so it's my pleasure to welcome you, Andrea and Tricia, as you kind of set the stage for the principles of effective communication. Welcome.
Thank you, Ernie. We appreciate it. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. A couple apologies up front. I'm very red. My lighting is very strange, so I apologize for that. I tried everything and I couldn't figure out how to fix it. So that it is what it is. I'm going to be running just a couple quick slides, which actually I think are decent reference materials for you guys. So I'm also a technological nitwit, so please bear with me if anything happens. So hold on while I try to do what I need to do. Okay, share screen. There's our program. And live. Trisha, can you see that?
Absolutely. Nitwit, yeah, nitwit for the win. You got it.
Yeah, well, yeah, for now. Anyway, we'll see what happens. So we are here obviously to talk a little bit about compliance and ethics communications. Rethink Compliance is an organization that is kind of one-stop shopping in many ways for the ethics and compliance officer and office. We provide training and communication services, a big part of our business. I head up our advisory services business, which is our consulting arm. And as Ernie nicely said, I am joined here by Tricia, who heads up our creative services piece. So I am going to just quickly walk through our agenda today for the first 20 minutes. I am going to talk just a little bit about the fact that training and communications are actually very different, and they are both required for an effective compliance and ethics program. Tricia will then talk about communication being about persuasion, not just giving people information, but persuading them to care, and persuasion starting with knowing your audience. And then Tricia will move on and talk about building awareness with communications and then moving from your audience to action through training, which again are two different things. So first and foremost, I'll just really quickly start with the sentencing guidelines. I assume everybody out there knows what the sentencing guidelines are, of course, but like me, maybe you haven't read them in a while. The sentencing guidelines basically say that organizations have to take reasonable steps to communicate periodically and in a practical manner your compliance and ethics program. So communicate, that's what it starts with. And ways to communicate include conducting effective training, as well as otherwise disseminating information. So the sentencing guidelines do address training and communications separately. And then of course, everybody is probably familiar with the DOJ guidance that came out in 2019, first of all, and then updated in 2020. And there was a specific call out in there about kind of micro learning and shorter communications. The DOJ noted that companies have really started to invest in shorter and more targeted content from a compliance perspective, as opposed to sort of long training events. So it's very important to think of them together. I can't tell you how many times we've worked with clients kind of assessing their programs. And when we say, geez, we feel like you need to do more from the communications perspective, they'll say, we communicate every year with our annual training. And then we have to explain that training and communications are in fact two separate things and two different things and serve two different purposes. And sometimes they like that answer and sometimes they do not. So in addition to, the sentencing guidelines, as I mentioned, the DOJ. So if the DOJ comes in and starts kicking the tires, God forbid, on anybody's program out there, they are in fact going to look at training and communications separately. And I'll harken all the way back to 2012, which is a long time ago now, I'm afraid to say, when the very first declination was published, which was the Morgan Stanley case, where the DOJ specifically called out that the individual who went to jail had been trained 7 times in 8 years and had been otherwise communicated with something like 35 or 36 times. So certainly the DOJ and other regulatory agencies are going to look at these two things differently. And as I mentioned, anytime that a third party comes in to kick the tires and do an independent assessment of your program, whether it's Rethink Compliance or anyone else, they are also going to take a look at training and communications separately, and help and look at different things when determining whether or not your training program or your communications programs are effective. So really quickly, communications, and then Trisha is going to take it from here. I'm going to keep driving. That should make things even more complicated. Communication should be quick and to the point. So as opposed to a training event, which is going to be a longer event, obviously, you are trying to disseminate information, and you need to engage your listener. So if your listener doesn't care, you can communicate, as much as you want. And at the end of the day, they are not going to sort of take the message back. Communications should address one or more of the W's: who, what, when, where, and why. And be relevant to your audience. Nothing's worse than when you get a communication from your company and you're like, who cares? This is not relevant to me. So those are kind of 5, big points to think about as you're crafting your communications program. I am now turning it over to Trisha.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Andrea. That was seamless technology, and you are now friends. Thank you so much. This is this is a topic that I'm passionate about, so I'm really excited to both talk with you and then listen to our colleagues in the industry from CHS and Lockheed Martin. We're going to share a video right now that is part of our library of communications, and then we'll talk a little bit about why we chose this video in particular. So Andrea, can you play the video?
I will indeed try. Here we go.
It's gonna play.
We have the right to a private life, the right to be respected. We have the right to have our rights honoured and protected. But we live in an age where we let our information be collected. From smartphones and websites, terms and conditions we've accepted, we let our data be selected and perfected to give us easier lives. We risk our data being detected and neglected once onto paper and hard drives by bad guys, looking for ways to abuse the system. But there's also the good guys making sure no one ends up a victim. And not just because someone told them to, but because doing what is right is the right thing to do. That could be your credit card information, your browsing history, your medical records, each illness and injury, your cell phone number, political affiliation, your home address or sexual orientation. And behind every bit of data is the life of a person, a life you have the power to better or worsen depending how much you care. As when you're working with data, you need to be aware of the signs, of people trying to steal it, of those crossing the lines, of the tricks they'll use to get in and commit crimes. You wouldn't keep your own private details just laying around, so don't keep other people's where they can easily be found, and ask yourself, does it even need to be kept? As data you don't have is impossible to intercept. So keep on top of what is needed, and only keep what's essential, and securely delete anything confidential. People put their trust into companies and put their trust into you. So it's to everyone's benefit when you know what to do. Treat other people's data as if that person was you.
Okay, you can go to the next. Yes, this is the slide.
Yep, you want me to build?
Yes, thank you. The first one. So that we chose this video for a couple of reasons. One is we love Gary Turk. He is a poet we discovered nearly 4 years ago now, and we worked with him on 3 videos to help communications pieces to help build awareness of important topics in compliance and to help get people's attention. But the reason this video in particular I wanted to share is, number one, it starts with the audience. It starts with you. It starts with the listener. What do you care about? Getting that person thinking about their own personal data and their own needs, and actually he circles back around to it at the end, is one of the key parts of communication. And we'll talk about that in just a second. The other reason I wanted to share this is it focuses on awareness. If you notice, there was kind of a shape to the script where there was a, kind of the last 20 seconds where there were a few specifics, some expectations. But the goal of this video is to build awareness of an issue before digging into, okay, here are the rules, here are the expectations, here are the policies. So let's take those two pieces and pull them apart. So when you're communicating with any communication, I'm talking to my mom on the phone, I'm giving a presentation, I'm calling my kid's school. There are three parts going on, and number one, and this is the build, there we go, is what I want to get across. And number two is me, the audience. And number three, I forgot the order I put in, is the channels. And so the channels is what we use to communicate. And so you communicate in a number of different channels. You send out emails, you create videos, you hold stand-up presentations. Those are all channels. Like what do you use to get the message across? And the guy in the front there, the little redhead in the green suit, he's the audience. He's up there, he's in front, and he's in focus because he is key to what you get across. We spend a lot of time thinking about that kid in red in the back. He's the message. He's, what it is that we want people to know. But actually, communication, persuasion starts with understanding your audience. Just like Gary Turk started with the audience. What do you care about? You care about your own private life. Okay, focus on what you care about. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in our work setting and related to data privacy. So on the next slide, you can see a little bit about what we mean by focusing on your audience in order to persuade. Think about who your audience is. Now, for many of you, your audience is they're engineers, and they are agricultural workers, they are accountants. But what else are they? What else do they care about? And so what you see here is just an example of the sort of audience profile that we work up for our clients, and that you can also use in your thinking. This is very much truncated to fit on a slide, by the way, but a kind of a persona, so that when you are using the tools that Lockheed is going to show you later on, and using some of the distribution channels that CHS is going to talk about, and the localization channels, but before you even get to those steps, what do you know about your audience as a person? And it really helps to think of them as a person. So just as an example, this is actually a persona that we wrote about an engineering group, but nowhere in there does it say that they are engineers, so that is important. What it says is, I love working here because I have the freedom to innovate. I move really fast in my job. I'm a person who takes risks. I love being able to get the job done. It's not just about clocking out at the end of the day. I have a ton of ideas. Don't get in my way. And when you understand that's the person you're talking to, that's the kid in the green shirt in focus up at the other end of your message, well, then you start to understand a little bit about how to communicate to them. So what somebody who fits this persona, and you're probably thinking, for example, oh, that is not the people I work with. Exactly. This is about recognizing the differences and the nuances in your audiences. So someone who fits this persona, what do they want? They want lots of freedom. They don't want a lot of bureaucracy to get in their way. And then the next step from that is you're like, okay, what do I, the kid in the red shirt in the back, and my little string telephone, how do I construct them in order to reach that kid in the green shirt in front? Because I've already thought about that kid in the green shirt. And what that person might need to hear is, we're not here to get in your way. We're here to help you innovate. We're here to help you move faster. And that is not true of every audience. And so you start to think about this specificity. And I'm willing to guess that many of you, if not most of you, know enough about you're embedded enough in your institutions and you have enough interactions with people around you that you could start to craft some of these creative paragraphs on your own and start thinking specifically about who is that specific person I'm talking to and how can I best reach them. And that helps you make those decisions, those operationalizing decisions and creative decisions. So this is just a bit of a peek into what we mean when we say know your audience, because persuasion starts with your audience. It doesn't start with what you want them to know. It starts with what they need to hear. So on the next slide, let's talk about the other parts of the other reason I chose that video. It does not jump into, hey, don't share information that you're not supposed to share. Put data on secure servers. It doesn't jump into, here are the laws. It starts at the top of the marketing funnel. So this is a classic marketing funnel. Many of you have probably seen it before. If you've even dipped your toe into the world of marketing, this is 101. It's classic, and classics are classics for a reason, because we have a lot to learn from them. And what we learn from that is we don't start at the bottom of the funnel. We don't start with what we need people to do. We start by building awareness. And so brands out there, if you're selling butter, the first thing a butter brand wants to do and wants to measure is, what is our brand awareness? Can people even name our names when asked to name a brand of butter? What's the analogy in the compliance world? That is, are people even aware that a risk is a risk? If I say the words conflicts of interest, does a light go on in their heads? They may not yet know what to do about that or how to avoid them, but have I even planted the seed that this is something they need to be aware of? Is data privacy even on their radar? And so communication needs to start at the top of that funnel. Build awareness, grab attention, so that as you pique their interest, oh, this is something I should care about because it applies to my job and my well-being. I want to do that because you have shown that you understand me. I have desire. You have shown that you understand me, and I want to do this well. Then you can move down to action. Typically, the action is where your training is coming in. So this isn't a perfect analogy to the compliance or the training world. This is a marketing tool, but it's a way to think, okay, like when what is the purpose of my communications? Am I just sending out emails that say, hey guys, fill out the conflicts of interest form, which is an important email to send out. But am I, what is the purpose of my communications? Am I using them to build awareness? Am I using them to, plant that seed? And when you understand this, then you're going to do a better job at building that string, that little tin can that we saw that connects you, the kid in the red shirt, to that kid in the green shirt. And so when it's time for that employee to take the right steps through action, they're going to be more ready to understand and apply that training. And so I'm super excited that our colleagues from CHS are going to talk a little bit about their programs, and our colleagues from Lockheed are going to talk about their programs, because I think they both do a great job of fitting into those two things that we talk about, which is knowing your audience and building awareness first. We threw in a question slide here, but Ernie, I'm pretty sure we're not supposed to be taking questions at this time. So I
That's great.
will pass it back to you. Can't wait to hear everybody.
Thank you. That was a wonderful overview, and it really sets the stage. And I'm glad that you ended with the Q&A slide, because I wanted to let people know that as they have questions throughout the remainder of our program, they can chat them in, and we'll try to capture those. And if we don't have time to answer the questions in this particular segment, we actually have added a fishbowl, and you'll have a link to that. It's a 30 minutes right after the 90-minute program, and we'll all do a real deep dive into this topic and have an engaging conversation with our presenters as well as our practitioners in the audience. And so for our first practitioner presentation, we have CHS, which is a Fortune 100 global energy, grains, and foods business. And it's my pleasure to welcome, first of all, Jack Lenzi, who is a Vice President of Compliance and Integrity. And Jack joined CHS in 2015 from KPMG. He has over 20 years experience in ethics and compliance, and I consider him a real luminary and thought leader in this space. And he's joined by Stacy Tietjen, who is the Director of Compliance and Integrity for CHS. And she's responsible for compliance and integrity initiatives, including compliance and integrity communications, compliance training, policy and program development, and internal investigations. She has over 20 years of experience in the agriculture industry. It's our real pleasure to have you both here. So tell us more about your program and how you engage leadership and employees.
Thank you, Ernie. It's a real pleasure to be back working with you and the folks at ECI. I appreciate the introduction, although the 20 years in compliance and integrity, I think, explains the gray hair that I have all over my head. But it has been a wonderful ride and really an opportunity to meet some very, very talented and creative people along the way that I certainly have learned from, and I think Stacy's program has as well, and you're going to hear about that in a few moments. I'm here to tell you a little bit about CHS and what kind of drives us in our programming. So Stacy, if you move ahead one slide. This is our purpose, creating connections to empower agriculture. Ernie said we are primarily an agricultural-based company. We're a global grain trader, buyer, influencer, and we really do see ourselves as a company that actually helps feed the world. You look over to the right about our values. I don't think you can say enough about values that a company holds. As the compliance and integrity officer, to see integrity as the #1 value for CHS is very rewarding. And it's held very closely by our senior management teams and by our staff. It really is what helps drive us. I also manage the environmental health and safety teams. So having safety as a value is almost as important as integrity. These are all critical. Inclusion as well, and the cooperative spirit is something that drives us. But I think that integrity value for me stands out first and foremost, maybe the first among equals. And that's, again, you'll see some themes play out in Stacy's communication program that I think reflect a lot of these values. One thing about CHS that's a little bit different than other publicly traded companies, thank you, Stacy, is that we are a cooperative. And as such, we have a unique form of ownership. The company's been around almost 100 years, but in its current form, only since 1998, when Cenex and Harvest States merged to form CHS. Our ownership, again, is very different than other publicly traded companies. We have about 20,000 preferred stockholders, 70,000 farmers and farm families that are owners of the cooperative, and 900 local cooperatives across the country that also own a part of our commercial business. Uniquely, we have a 17-member board of directors who are elected in regional elections across the country for a 3-year term. And one of the prime requirements for anybody to serve on our board is that they are an active farmer or rancher. Next slide, Stacy. So what are our businesses? Well, we're in the energy business. We have a couple of refineries where we take Canadian crude and turn into diesel and gasoline for our Midwest, mountain states, and Western customers, partners. We have an agronomy business with a lot of product input for the farmer. And then we have our grain business and processing. Again, we buy literally hundreds of millions of bushels of grain around the world every year. And it is something that is a marvel to behold at times. Next slide, Stacy. So by the numbers, again, this is the challenge in part Stacy has with her team. We have about 11,000 employees. The vast majority, almost 10,000 or more, are in the US. But our footprint is huge. We have more than 600 locations around the globe, and more than 500 of those are here in the United States. Ranging from a 2-person office to a 1,000-person facility. And And our revenue for the past year is about 28 billion, down a little bit from 32 billion just a couple of years ago, but in that Fortune 100 positioning. Next slide, Stace. So given that profile, I think CHS has pretty unique challenges. I mean, I think we all do. Everybody on the phone has unique challenges in their company and their program. For us, it's the diversified product line as a starting point, but more importantly, it's the decentralized workforce. You know, only about half of our employees are on computers and have an email account that they generally are on every day, and it's our prime way of communicating with them. That leaves half of our employees offline. No computers, no phones, no muscle memory of working with the compliance team or anybody else for that matter. And you still have to reach out and touch them, right? And gain their trust. We have more than 14 languages around the globe that we work with, but there are 7 core languages that really dominate the international market for us. The challenge for us and you is the relevancy of our work. Are we addressing the right risks with the right training? And of course, we all live in an era where shorter is better and more targeted is better. So given that background and that profile of the company, the challenge that I've given Stacy in the last couple of years is this: how do we, as compliance professionals, how do we impact our employees? How do we reach out and touch our employees in an honest, earnest way that makes sense for us and them and gives them a sense of partnership with management, partnership with a company, ownership, if you will, in our shared responsibility to do the right thing. So Stacy's going to take the lead on the next 8 slides or so and talk about a communication campaign, which I think is gaining traction in the company, and we look forward to more. Stace.
Excellent. Thank you, Jack. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Stacy Tietjen, Director of Compliance and Integrity at CHS. And Jack is right. So we had a communication plan, much like I'm sure you all do, that had very foundational elements, you know, things like we talked about our code of conduct, and we talked about our micro trainings with ongoing campaigns based upon various risks that we had identified. That was coupled with leadership messages and resources. However, we found that it didn't resonate with our employees. You know, they very much treated the code of conduct and all their leadership messages almost like a check the box. It didn't resonate. They were going through the motions. That they just didn't personalize the messages that were within. So when Jack came on board, we very much said, well, what can we do different? What could this possibly look like? You know, because what we wanted to do, and that's what's in that lower right-hand quadrant about requirements, what we wanted to do is get rid of this check the box approach and really try to provide topics that were relevant for our employees, providing that impactful, effective, and genuine message, which we found we actually had already in our own files. We just had to figure out how we could deploy it and what that could look like. And also that most important piece, you know, how do we target our employees and hit the right messages to the right people at the right time? Basically, we wanted to hit the reset button on what we were doing on a communication campaign, and how can we do that better? So we went back to the drawing board and we said, okay, what should our strategy look like? Our strategy really, we focused on a few different elements. The first one that you can see here is we wanted to focus on one risk element at a time. I'm sure you all hear the same thing we do. There's too much information. There's too many things coming at us. How are we supposed to digest this information? Because let's be honest, more than that is too much. As simple as that. Not focusing on just one was too much at one time. So we wanted to have a strategy that we would hit the most impactful risks based upon some of our assessments that we were doing and making sure that we had the right ones identified. Then we decided on a layered approach. Jack did a great job explaining CHS. And if you got nothing else out of it, just know that we're diversified. And the fact that we are an agricultural cooperative and we literally are in the field. We're not just out in the left field, we're in the right field, we're in the center field, we're in all the fields. And when they don't have their computers necessarily right in front of them. There's some great pictures throughout our presentation that we do in-house that are literally our employees and our customers doing the work that they do every single day. So we knew that there wasn't just a one type of an approach that was going to work for CHS and all of the different types of employees that we have. So we needed something that was layered, something that would be able to hit at all employees wherever they were at. We also wanted to involve real employees. I think most of us are used to having management say one thing and your supervisor saying something, and compliance saying something, and HR saying something, and legal saying something. But however, it's different when it's your coworkers sitting next to you asking that question of, hey, did you hear about this? Do you know, are you going to incorporate that into your work? It needed to be real people talking about real things, which is the second thing. We want to talk about real situations. One of the things that we struggle with at CHS is how do we talk about things that happen here? For a long time, we had the protocol that you didn't share anything bad that happened. And now we're trying to say, oh no, there's a lot of great learning things that can come out of it. So we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to talk about real things. And then multiple channels of communication. We needed to have that layered approach that used different ways. We knew that we couldn't just rely on email. We couldn't just rely on messaging through the computer. We needed something from employees and at different layers. And we then listed out what objectives do we want? What were our objectives of our communications? First and foremost, we wanted to strengthen our culture. We needed to make sure that the culture was solid so that employees were confident and able to do their jobs with the right tools and resources every single day. Secondly, we wanted to operationalize policies. I very much used to come from the world where you could, read a policy and get to the end and say, oh, that was great policy, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. But how do we operationalize that? How do we get that to 10,000 people and being able to have them figure out how to incorporate that into their day-to-day? So that was another one of our objectives. We also wanted to increase transparency into the work that we do in compliance every single day. And making sure that they understand what tools and resources we have to offer them. Give them a kind of a peek behind the scenes as far as what is our everyday look like. And then we also, I mentioned earlier, want to provide some of those outcomes of some of the things we do look into. How do we get that to our employees in a way that doesn't seem gossipy or doesn't seem bad? How do we do that in a constructive way where they can actually learn from some of the things that we have learned from, what the findings? We wanted to start conversations. We wanted employees to talk about the things and talk to that coworker next to them to ask that question of how are you going to operationalize or how are you going to incorporate that into your day-to-day? And how do we have those conversations start that, again, were constructive and not just all about something that went wrong? And we also wanted to create personal connections back to the work that we're doing. How can people relate to the things we do? All with the goal of earning trust. Having that trust with our business partners, having that trust with our coworkers is very important in the work that we do from CHS. So how do we want it to go about is to change kind of our strategy. And that's what this slide's really looking at, is making sure that, when we come with those 4 elements, the foundational elements, whether we're looking at the requirements, whether we're looking at strategy and objectives, how do we change our strategy? And we came up with this as our go forward method. We wanted to change our compliance and integrity messages to become a layered approach. Again, not one size fits all, but how can we target and hit that same message in multiple ways that resonates with employees? Blended media. Again, I mentioned earlier, there wasn't one way that we could come to the table. There wasn't just one best widget or one best way to approach this. And we wanted to base this back to cases from the files. We wanted to make sure that we talked about real situations that CHS experiences, not just these hypothetical things that might have happened, and include some new resources that gives employees something exciting to look forward to. So you can see on the right side, we kind of had a strategy that brought together some management messages along with our integrity champions and empowering them to do some talking for us while incorporating the right communication platforms, all with the ability to be able to capture key metrics and KPIs in order for us to then be able to incorporate back into our project and our campaigns. Let me dive a little bit more into each one of those so you can kind of understand what approach we took. So the first one on the management messages, we really wanted to employ our tone at the top and making sure that the leaders had the tools and resources that they need and the understanding of what to expect when we do have communication campaigns that come out. So their message and their tone is really all about setting expectations for employees. They are the ones that tell the employees, why is this important? So what we did is when we anchor back to those risks identified, we'll actually have a specific topic and we'll provide them with a management toolkit on the campaign. That includes things like a draft email, so that if they're super busy at that moment, all they have to do is pull that email out, plug it into an email template, and then be able to personalize it and send that to their teams. It was very simple, almost spoon feeding. It also included a PowerPoint. Many of our management have one-on-ones, or they'll do team meetings, or they have opportunities now with being in COVID. A lot of them have taken to the technology as far as providing a weekly message, or sometimes it's a daily message to their employees. So we provided them with a template of a toolkit that had some pre-baked messages in there, so that would be easy for them to be able to roll out to their teams and reinforce or emphasize some of the key learnings that we're providing to them. We also provided them with speaking points in case they get questions. I think we all are familiar with the fact that not every manager is going to be a subject matter expert on compliance topics. So if they did get asked questions, we wanted to empower them to be able to answer them and provide them with at least some directions as far as what answers and responses were expected. So we had them some speaking points that then they're able to react to any kind of questions their staff may have to give them some confidence. And then we wanted to make sure they had the right tools and resources. So we do, around our risks, we provide them a job aid. And that's been very impactful for our employees. Just a simple one page that is simple to read, simple to look at, and really kind of helps operationalize the risks and some of the controls that we want to make certain that employees have awareness to. And then a video. So if the campaign includes a video, we send a link to the video so that they can then watch it in advance of the regular employees all getting the same message, or they can use that for part of their team meetings. So the management messages really played into then what we empowered our integrity champions to use. So while the tone at the top received the why we're doing things, then we'd send a similar type of a campaign to the integrity messages that really helped talk to the employees about what is it that you're expected to do, and really with the intent of helping operationalize these communications and provide employees with a little bit more personalization. So our integrity champions, I think we're up to about 65 of them across our company. And I think they're in 22 different countries as we speak. So they really take the messages, we do some training with them, and they take these messages and then help operationalize and bring it closer to the employees of which they work with that are coworkers. So it's been a great function. And then they also can funnel questions back to us. So when we empower them to go forward with communication campaigns, we also provide them with a similar toolkit. So they also have a draft email that they can then personalize and add in their own guidance as far as how to operationalize things. We provide them also with speaking points to help them become a little bit more of a subject matter expert. And often their campaigns will involve some speaking up messages too. And they also receive training from some of our subject matter experts. We also have a job aid similar to the one that we present to the management team. And then also the campaign involves a video. We link it back to the video. And then also we have a communication platform, meaning the fact that to round everything together, we try to make sure that employees have tools and resources in order to be able to push and pull messages. So we try to push them out, and then they also have a spot that they can go back to pull them when they need them. Because you know as well as I do, not all risks pop up at the same time that we're doing a communication campaign. Sometimes they need to refer to it a month later, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year. So we do have various ways for employees to be able to pull those messages as necessary. But those communication campaigns really help us, or the platforms really help us with the how are employees to come to the table and really be able to personalize some of these communications. It allows us to have some formal and informal messaging, and also multiple ways to digest the information. So I think we all know that every employee learns in different ways. So we try in every one of our campaigns to have some kind of a written, some kind of a video, some kind of a spoken, and some kind of an in-person way to absorb that information. And that really helps us extend our reach to those employees that aren't in front of that computer every single day. And it gives them ability to be able to focus in on what's important, what's really important about these messages. I know I had one employee that recently had talked to me about, Stace, sometimes when you guys are sending out your messages, it's like reading a 300-page book and then asking me what's the 5 most important things in the book. Sometimes they'll get it right, sometimes they won't. So they do. They need some direction as far as, hey, this is the important things and the things that you do day to day. And then they'll be able to help highlight some of their own. I'm going to pause for a second. Jack, I've been going on, and I know I want to give you an opportunity. Is there anything else about this piece that you would like to add before we move into showing the video?
Yeah, Stacy, I think one of the things that actually appeals to our audience is the fact that these are stories based on real cases.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult, in a company of our size to completely whitewash and protect the confidentiality and the privacy of all that are involved in a investigation. But the fact that we're communicating to them about real cases, even if we've modified them a little bit, helps, I think, rally the trust issue around what we're trying to do. Employees are saying, boy, if you're willing to share that with us, you must really care about it. And I think that helps build a bridge between what they may have started out thinking about us and where they ended up thinking about us and the journey that they're on. We've, on the more serious cases, we've got a whole different communication channel that we call lessons learned. And we bring the senior leadership together from SVPs to VPs and directors to hear about cases that, really had an impact on people and profit or the environment. And it's really about getting better as we go. So I think, one of the core foundations of what you're doing is talking about reality. And I think people respect that.
Yeah, and thank you, Jack. And Jack highlighted 2 important pieces that we've been working on over the last year. The lessons learned is really for our top leadership to understand some of the things that happen behind the scenes. And then the other piece that Jack is referring to is our Integrity Matters series. So we actually created a video series with the help actually of Rethink Compliance. We enlisted them to help us with that, where we're actually creating videos. And that helps us humanize our policies because we are using our own employees as actors and actresses. And it's been a really fun series. And you can see on the right, these are the different risk areas we've covered so far. And, kind of like the Friends episode, we're trying to name every one of our videos just so that it kind of resonates a little bit more with our employees. But this has really been a great way for us to share from the files some of our lessons learned through different investigations that have happened, and also just another way for us to be able to communicate to employees in a more personalized way. These videos are short. They're meant to be very, very short, 3 to 5 minutes, and they have really targeted messages for employees so that they'll be able to consume them and hopefully be able to learn a little bit for them. This is a newer campaign for us. But we started this about it just over a year ago in January of 2019. We've had 6 different videos so far that we have launched. All of that have had quite a good reaction from our employees in the click rates and in the viewables. So as Jack mentioned, we have about half of our employees offline, and of those that are actually online on every single day, we have about a 25% viewing of it, which is very good from what we have from a non-mandatory standpoint. So each of these campaigns really has that cadence and involves all of those different components that I mentioned before with management messaging and integrity champions messaging, utilizing various platforms, and then I'll talk about KPIs in a second. So I wanted to show you what the campaigns look like, at least just from a sampling. So I know I mentioned a lot of the different components, whether it's the job aid or some of the toolkit pieces of the email or the PowerPoint presentation, speaking points. and then the cascading messages. So in a package, of course, it's all branded for CHS, but in a package deal, we kind of have all of this that goes out to the various layers of our employees in hopes that they're able to incorporate this into their regular team meetings. So I'd like to, and Andrea, I'm feeling your pain about the technology, but I'm going to try to show you one of our videos that we did create starring some of our employees. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to see if I click play. Jack, can you just give me a verbal whether you can hear it?
Yes.
Wow, you look busy today.
Not really. Just approving a few invoices before I head to lunch.
You are reading them, aren't you?
Absolutely not. They just need a signature on them so they can get paid.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound right.
Well, what's this other services?
That's a red flag.
I don't know. I'm assuming it's just other stuff that isn't included in the contract. Other stuff.
Hang on a second. The contract's made out to Agribusiness Unlimited, but the payment's going to Agri-Stuff Ltd, and it's in a different country.
That's a huge red flag.
When you sign the invoice, you're saying you've reviewed it and read the whole thing. You're saying you approved the payment and you're taking responsibility for it.
Don't just be a rubber stamp.
Vague descriptions of services rendered, unusual payment terms, these are red flags. They could mean that someone's trying to hide funds they're trying to use for illegal purposes.
Bribery. Corruption.
Hold on. I'm not doing anything wrong.
You put your signature right there. Companies and people get in real trouble with serious consequences for these sorts of things.
Microsoft recently paid more than $24 million to settle charges of corruption. Walmart paid $282 million to settle charges of inadequate accounting controls to prevent corruption.
All because of an invoice?
This is where it starts, and you could help stop it. If you have any questions, you can talk to your compliance and integrity team. They're here to help.
When you sign something, you take responsibility for it. So watch out for red flags. The consequences can be significant. We've got resources to help you. You're not on your own.
At CHS, we recognize you may not know all the warning signs of a possible risk or liability to the company. Even without this complete knowledge, there is still an important part that you play. If you sense something is not right or is out of place or just feels wrong, you have a responsibility to raise your hand. No matter your role, we are all here to protect CHS. Sometimes the right decision isn't obvious or simple, so if you need further information, tools or resources surrounding this topic, please contact our compliance and integrity team. So please, raise your hand and speak up. Your concerns will be heard and addressed. We are all committed to act with integrity.
Okay, I get it now. My signature matters. And if I can help stop corruption by reading these invoices more closely, then I guess I'd better get back to it.
I knew you'd get it, and we've all got your back.
So it was quite fun to launch that level of a video. It's starring our own employees. As I say, there was one way to get our employees involved, get them excited and get them talking about each other. So it was a good campaign, but it is things that we have learned that we wanted to incorporate and have our employees talk about it. So let me figure out how to make it. There we go. Now let me talk just for a second about effectiveness. So if I'm going to be completely transparent, so if there's an area that we're still working on maturing, this would be probably the area that we're still looking at. But from an effectiveness standpoint, we want to make sure that what we're putting forward to our employees actually resonates with them and that the messages are effective. So we're monitoring the KPIs and metrics that we can, including things like click rates on the video, the email, whether they're looking at policies afterwards. We're looking at how many integrity champions are downloading the information. We're able to look at things like the watch time videos, you know, how long are they actually staying on the video? Are they watching it to the end? And all of these things help us understand if the videos are resonating with employees. And as I mentioned earlier, the videos are not required for they're not mandatory. So from a voluntary basis, you know, we're looking at what that might look like and what management's wanting us to move forward with if we wanted to mandate them or not. But in the end, our goal is really to work on changing the behavior of our employees, making sure that they know what to do, know how to do it, and have all those right tools and resources. And then as we say, this is a newer campaign for us. The video piece has only been around since January of 2019. So we're looking for if there's any trends or anything else that would indicate the effectiveness of these programs. So in closing, and Jack, I can finish this slide and then you can add in some comments, but in closing, what we're working on is really knowing the audience. What do they want to hear? How do they want to hear it? And how can we get that message to them in a way that we can keep them engaged in making sure that, you know, the message doesn't just become a check the box type of an item. We want to layer the approach. You know, if we're learning that one style is not the answer for our employees, it may not be the answer for a lot of different companies. So, and utilizing those multiple media methods in order to create messages that they actually remember. What story can we tell that they will remember? And Jack, anything else to add on before we turn it back over to Ernie?
Yeah, I just two points. One, you know, utilizing employees was really a stroke of genius, and it wasn't ours. I mean, many of you in the industry have been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, because of our smallish nature, there's quite a buzz that goes through the hallways and functions when people actually are being filmed and practicing their thespian skills for the sake of the company. And each of these videos, we pull from different segments of the organization for the most part and create these mini buzzes of activity and people talking about it, which can only be a good thing. Beyond that, using your employees for video production is certainly cost effective, right? The price is right. But in about a year's worth of blood, sweat, and tears, you know, we're still trying to figure out how to best measure the impact here. But I can tell you this, the number one thing that employees click on our intranet by far is a CEO message. When our CEO has a town hall, it's number one by far. But Stacy, in a span of a year, has moved to the number 2 spot in employee interest. So we get more clicks and more interest than any other issue on the CHS intranet other than the CEO. So we got to, you know, find a way to really understand how impactful this is. There's a stickiness to some of the messages, and that's what you want. I think the Rethink team talked a little bit about that. You know, I love that explanation you had about attention, interest, desire, and action. You know, from a compliance perspective, for me, it's about attention, belief, then ownership, and then action, right? We're selling a proposition like other people are selling sneakers and soda. The proposition is that ethics and integrity have value to protect you and the company. If once we get their attention, we have to earn their belief, and then they own it, right? They're a part of the solution, not a part of the problem, not on the sidelines, and then they take action. Anyway, that's just my quick response to what we've heard thus far, and I'll turn it back to you, Stace.
All right, thank you, Jack. And Ernie, we're going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Stacy and Jack. It's a great overview. Love the video. Some good comments in our chat. Got a couple of questions in the chat you might want to take a look at. We won't address those in our live forum here, but I encourage people to continue to bring those into the chat, because in our period afterwards, that 30 minutes, when we go into a fishbowl, we actually will have a lot more interaction around these questions, and we hope you'll be able to stay with us for that portion of the program. Our next presenter is Lockheed Martin, and Lockheed Martin has always been a pace setter in terms of our practice. over the last several decades. And so we're really excited to have them share some of their communication strategies. And we have three presenters. We have Denise Drennan, who is currently the ethics officer for all the international and United States Aeronautics field sustainment sites in the Greenville, South Carolina facility within aeronautics. She joined Lockheed Martin in 1981 and has held a variety of positions, got into ethics there as an analyst in 2006. She'll be joined by Jenny Jackson and Jen Whitmore. Jenny is currently the ethics officer and site lead for Lockheed Martin Aeronautics in Fort Worth, Texas. And she joined Lockheed Martin in 2013 as the trade compliance group and in the trade compliance group and legal. And she joined the ethics team recently in 2017. Jen is the ethics officer for Lockheed Martin UK and is responsible for implementing the corporation's ethics program across all the business areas in the United Kingdom. And she joined Lockheed Martin in 2019, having served in the Royal Navy as a logistics officer and barrister for 17 years. And so it's great to have you all here. We're excited about what you're going to share with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Ernie. We're so glad to be here with all of you who are online and with CHS and Rethink. Continuing on the communications topic, we thought in this sort of strange and often virtual world we're in, it'd be helpful to share some insights that we have come across to break down barriers in communication that we're finding, and to share some tools that have been helpful, maybe some that have not been so helpful. And then, as Ernie and everyone have mentioned later, we'd love to hear your feedback and sort of the tools that you've come up with. Next slide. I'd like to talk just a minute about agenda. We want to share methods of communicating in light of those obstacles, debunk some ethics misconceptions. And we also want to share, again, some successful and some unsuccessful communications campaigns. So Denise, over to you to share some of those challenges.
Okay, thank you, Jen. First, I wanted to talk a few minutes about some communication challenges we had and some misconceptions employees can have about our ethics organization in general. We found that their opinion or understanding can really vary as to how they see our roles and responsibilities. And we want employees to feel like that we're a resource for them, right? If they have any questions or need advice, we're not just investigators of allegations. We want to be viewed as a resource. So we feel like, regularly exposing all of our employees to ethics messaging is crucial, right? Because we found that employees that regularly receive ethics messaging are more comfortable when they come to us. So we feel like it's our job to get out there and engage with our employees and make sure that they understand our roles and responsibilities. For example, we have employees that fall under a collective bargaining agreement, and we want to make sure that they realize that we're limited on issues that we can investigate because of this collective bargaining agreement. So we think it's really, really important that leaders keep our messaging regularly out there to their group of employees, and also that we as ethics officers get out there and engage, whether it's attend staff meetings virtually or hopefully post-pandemic get out there and really meet one-on-one with our employees. But for the last year or so, we've really tried to use various forms such as instant messaging, Skype, Zoom to really keep our face out there to our employees. One of the conceptions I think is that we fight here is confidentiality. We try to inform our employees that, we maintain confidentiality to the greatest extent possible, but we don't guarantee it, right? We need to make sure employees understand that in certain circumstances, we just can't guarantee confidentiality. So, and then I think that we talk directly to employees and leaders, which in fact we don't. I want to educate everyone on the importance of two-way communication, even offered a role play with them if they come to me for guidance, and give them an opportunity to stop and think objectively about the situation and the concern they might have. We adopted Mary Gentile's Voicing Our Values techniques years ago, and they're wonderful to use to help make employees stop and think about things. They're asked questions, obtain data, reframe the issue, and talk to others. And I think if you can, when an employee comes to you or contacts you, I think stopping and using some of those techniques to help them work through can really benefit them in addressing an issue with their leader or with a co-worker, however it might be. So I would just stress again the two-way communication there for leaders and employees. Then another misconception was around discipline. At Lockheed Martin, we tell all our employees that the ethics organization does not determine any corrective action when an investigation is substantiated. And we try to set the expectation up front when employees come to us by telling them, the whole investigative process, how it's going to work, and what information they will be provided at the end, whether the investigation is substantiated or unsubstantiated. We found some confusion sometimes with policy. They don't know where to go for certain policies, but we have a fabulous code of conduct that's online. It's searchable. It relates to and defines what policy you can go to that might address the various topics you might have. So it's really, really a great reference tool that we have for employees. And again, if you're a touch labor employee, which might have limited internet connectivity, it's still searchable, through their workstations in their work areas, and it's very easy to operate. And or they can contact us, and we try to help them find out any information they might need. So another thing is, we want to make sure every employee understands what it means when they come to ethics, what the allegation means when they come to us, and what in the collective bargaining agreement situation, what the policy or practice allows us to do. So, this goes back to the various ways that we can communicate, and we just again want to stress that employees, whether your employees have computer access or touch labor, that you need to just find creative ways to get out there and communicate with them. If it's a simple phone call to a employee working from home, just to check in and see how they're doing it, that builds trust, and that can just lead to a favorable work experience for the employee. And then finally, leaders need to understand that they're the ones interacting with their employees on a regular basis, and they're, like was said before, they're really the key to setting the tone at the top when it comes to doing the right thing, and when it comes to helping us spread the ethics message around. So, we've had to really up our game with the pandemic, and we've tried to, think of key ethics messaging that reach our entire population. And Jen's going to come in now and talk about what we found worked and hasn't worked for us in getting our ethics messaging out. So over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Denise. So yeah, I think knowing your audience and tailoring your message accordingly, as Denise says, is definitely the key when it comes to communicating. And that can often mean that you'll have various different ways of communicating. Over time at Lockheed Martin, we've explored different ways of communicating, and we've come to learn what works well for us, and perhaps what might not have been quite so successful in terms of employee engagement. We've found that it's the communication that lets us engage on a personal level, or at least makes it feel personal, that tends to be most effective when it comes to employee engagement. But of course, engaging on a personal level has become more difficult in recent times with the COVID pandemic and the restrictions that came with that. But we've continued to be innovative so that we can still achieve that personal engagement, but virtually. So we're able to still visit sites and attend staff meetings to deliver training, albeit via a camera. And one of the other ways that we've continued to communicate is using a tool called My Simple Show. My Simple Show is an external software platform that we use that allows us to create a storytelling video. So it turns something complex like a written policy into a short, simple, engaging video. And what really interested me about My Simple Show was that as I looked around the business, particularly because a lot of people were working from home, it became apparent that they were dealing with a huge volume of email traffic on a day-to-day basis. And I really wanted to make sure that my communication was standing out there. So I hoped that if I produced a video using My Simple Show, rather than perhaps just adding to a long list of things that they needed to read, that it might catch people's attention and perhaps provide a welcome break. And that has proved to be the case based on the feedback I've received so far. So I use My Simple Show each month when I choose an ethics and compliance topic that I want to bring to the attention of employees and leaders in the UK. And it's literally as straightforward as taking a form of words, cutting and pasting it into the tool, and the tool itself will then provide illustrations to match with the key words in that script. And then once the video is being created, I'm able to then narrate it, adding in that real personal touch, which, as I mentioned earlier, we feel is really important in terms of having that employee engagement. And from start to finish, it doesn't take more than 30 minutes to create the video, which is great. So rather than me talk further to this slide about what works really well for us at Lockheed Martin and what's perhaps been less successful, we thought we would put together a My Simple Show video for the purpose of this session so that you can hear through the video what's worked well for us and get to see what the tool can do firsthand. So let's have a look at that now. Communications, what has worked and what has not. When it comes to employee engagement, we have found that in-person or virtual site visits and meetings have worked well. Having personal engagement makes the messaging more memorable and usually leads to employees reaching out to the ethics office afterwards to raise concerns or to ask questions. Creating videos using My Simple Show, like this one, has also proven to be effective. It's a great way to explain complex matters, such as policies, in a simple and engaging way. Again, we have found it makes the messaging more memorable and is a welcome break from day-to-day work. Let's look now at what has kind of worked. We have also produced written communications, often aimed at leaders. These typically take the form of newsletters. Written communications can be good for delivering key messaging, but it is dependent on leaders finding the time and motivation to read it and share the key messaging with others. Let's now look at what hasn't worked so well for us. In our experience, surveys and quizzes have limited impact because there is less opportunity to deliver messaging. Whilst they can be useful for us to learn from our employees and take action accordingly, the value of the results is dependent on how many people choose to complete the survey or quiz. And our experience has been that uptake can be low unless mandated. So that's what's worked for us and what hasn't worked so well when communicating with employees and leaders at Lockheed Martin. We recognise that effective communication is an ongoing journey, so it would be great to hear what's worked for you. Please do share your experiences in the chat box. Thanks for listening. So that's My Simple Show and what we feel works well and sometimes not quite so well when we're trying to achieve employee engagement through communications. Now Jenny will take some time to share more details about successful internal communications that we have at Lockheed Martin.
Thanks, Jen. I think I should have gone before you because you know. So I just want to talk a little bit about some internal communications or more traditional communications that we have had some success with, but which we're working on to sort of up that game, because we know it's kind of, you know, the messaging sometimes gets stuck or lost. So we are lucky at Lockheed to have lots of corporate provided messaging. In the upper left-hand corner is a brochure called How the Ethics Process Works, which we provide to anyone who comes to our office to report, or either virtually or in real life. Corporate provides training, you know, onboarding training, in our annual compliance training that we do throughout the year. So locally, and by locally, you know, we're all over the world, but Aero is really what I'm talking about. We have also developed lots of communications. We have the opportunity to contribute to or generate our own messaging. One tool that the company uses is LeaderLink that you see there in the lower left-hand side. And we get a monthly spot in LeaderLink for an article. And we found, though, it's called LeaderLink, and it sometimes the messaging doesn't flow from there as well as we would like. So last year we developed a new tool called Everyday Ethics. You see it in the middle, the lower middle there. And it's also a monthly article, but it's sort of the short and sweet or more user-friendly version. It links to whatever the LeaderLink topic is, like gifts and business courtesies, conflict of interest, you know, just our general topics that we all talk about. And it's meant to be used by leaders. They can print it and hang it at their desk. They can talk about it in crew meetings. It's on our intranet each month when it pops up. It's also on the video monitors within our manufacturing floor. So we're, you know, it's just one mechanism to try to reach other levels of employees. The lower left, the right-hand side, sorry, you see Denise. She supports her client group with a newsletter called Essentially Ethics, sort of along the same lines. And another tool, which is really my favorite of all the tools, and we borrowed it from another LM company and other departments here at Lockheed and Aero at least have borrowed it from us. And that's called FastFacts, and that's the upper right-hand corner. That's an older version, but still you get the idea. We realized that in our employee base, not everybody really understands what we do. We've all kind of talked about it. You know, we have the stigma of almost being going to the principal's office. And so in order to sort of tell people what we do, you know, we are a resource for employees, get that messaging out, and we're just normal people. And we, you know, if you need us, we're here for you. We talk about this any chance we get, I guess. I use it in onboarding. If I get invited to a staff meeting or a crew meeting or an all hands, this is kind of my go-to if it's appropriate, because there's just a lot of information and you can pick and choose what you want to talk about as it's appropriate for that particular meeting. And then, you know, as we all experienced the weird last year due to the pandemic, we had to be more thoughtful about how we got this more traditional messaging out. You know, we had a large newly teleworking population who might have been used to seeing it on the video monitors or, you know, laying around on a table in a break room. So we've come up with new messaging tools, but just providing it in a variety of ways. So like a lot of people have talked about, the multiple media sources. So emails, still the intranet, still here in the plant, you know, on the video screen, and placing hard copies around in case somebody was really interested and wanted to, you know, take it back to their desk and read it. And that's all we've got. So we'd love to hear what you all are doing in this space. And Ernie, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I love the simple show concept. And so what we're going to do, we have about 15 minutes in this regular session. And I think it would be good if we can get to some questions. Again, we're going to be going into kind of a 30-minute after session that will involve exiting and then coming back in so we can do a deep dive with our panelists in these great ideas. And so I'm going to take a couple of questions right now, though, based upon the Lockheed presentation, and then we will move into our fishbowl conversation, where you'll have a chance to actually unmute yourself or enter questions in the chat, and our presenters will have dialogue with each other and with you, and we can go deeper. And so one of the things that was a question that I had with regard to Simple Show is, Jen, how many times did you have to tape that narrative? Because I can tell you, I'd have to do like 20 takes, maybe 30, maybe 50. But I mean, you just sounded so great, and I just wondered, is that difficult to do? Do you can you patch it together, like if you do the first part really good, then you can redo the second part, or do you have to go through it all again? How does that work?
Yes, so you're able to record audio for each scene that appears. So it's not the case that if you reach the middle and make a mistake that you've then got to start from the very beginning again. So it's great to be able to just record those scene by scene. And there's also the ability as well to be able to load audio clips as well. So if you wanted somebody else to do the narration, then they can record the audio clips, send it over, and then you can upload it into the software as well.
That's amazing. And all of this is accomplished through AI, right? Artificial intelligence. That's the way this works. Or do you know what the back end aspect of it is?
My Simple Show are definitely the experts. I assume it is as a result of AI, but I must admit I'm not that familiar with the mechanics of the tool itself. We've purchased some licenses to use, but yes, I would say that AI is at play within the My Simple Show tool.
And so what is the cost of Simple Show? Do you have any figures that you can give us?
I'm afraid I don't, but what I do know is there is a level of access that people can have for free, and then you're able to also purchase licenses, and through doing so it opens up other options, such as being able to narrate the video like I did. But there's various levels ranging from a more basic free version to purchasing licenses.
And do you recommend that people just go out using the free version and try it out? I mean, can they get a good experience from that to test drive that?
Yes, I would have thought, the opportunity to just, create a video and see how it plays. I mean, for us, I think one of the aspects of it that does make it attractive is the ability to be able to do your own narration, because it goes back to the point of making it more personal, and so it really feeling like it is your ethics officer that's talking to you through the video. But yes, there's certainly enough available on a free basis to be able to try it out.
Well, I think I would want you to be my narrator. Do you do this as a side gig?
I would
Apparently
have to get
not.
permission. I don't think that would be allowed.
Okay, well, we got some other questions that are coming in, and I'm going to stay with Lockheed Martin for just a second, because some of these questions are also for CHS, and I think that it would be good for us to do these in the fishbowl. to have a more robust conversation. So let's see here what questions. We do have something from Nicole Good. She says that, let's see here. She's used Adobe Spark videos that are super easy to develop and is free with their institutional license. So just offering that. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with Adobe, but I really like the application of this because one, it's inexpensive, and two, it allows you to get timely messages out quickly. It supports the relationship with the ethics officer. It's a familiar voice. I mean, it's hard to see any downsides around the use of Simple Show. Are there downsides? Limitations?
I think, well, I suppose there are limitations in the sense of the number of illustrations that are available. You know, there's not an endless library. And so depending on the topic you might be trying to cover, I guess it might dictate how much imagery you've got to choose from. I suppose another downside may also be that you may want to show closed captions when you're playing the video, which is a functionality of my Simple Show. What I did find is when I do videos with closed captions, that it can become quite busy, the screen, because you then have all of the imagery as well as the closed captions as well, which are quite large. And there's not the ability to be able to turn those off and on as the viewer. You would have to create a version with closed captions on or a version without. But overall, I think it is very positive, and being, as you say, Ernie, being able to create something relatively quickly and easily so you can deliver timely messaging is great.
I'll just add one thing in there. The tool looks very, very cool. But one of the things that we always say is like, you gotta mix it up. So I would imagine that like it either will have a shelf life, or you'll want to use that tool plus another thing, plus, you know, to keep variety. But I think it looks like a very interesting tool. And I love the fact that it was your audio.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're on, Andrea, because that really, I was going to ask you a question. And we got some questions here for Stacy and Jack too. And so hopefully they're on and can contribute in the next few minutes before we go to our other room. But Andrea, you know, one of the things I've often felt is that it's really important to keep it fresh, because people become habituated. Now, and that's a challenge for me, because there are features that we develop that have a long shelf life. And the question is how do you know when to kill something, you know, and come up with something new? Or do you have a combination of those? Something that is a kind of I don't know what the word is, a key branding kind of a feature. Because the other side of the coin is, even though you want to keep it fresh, our audience has a limited bandwidth sometimes in terms of recognizing what we're doing, and things that have multiple features for us. That sometimes, you know, people say, well, what is this? I don't remember this, or how does that all work?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, I hear what you're saying. What I would say is that, like, I think consistency is really important in certain areas of a compliance program. So like, you don't want to have a lot of variety in, say, your policy template, right? All the policies should follow the same so that the employee knows where to go look in a policy for a particular thing, right? But when it comes to communications, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've heard like, I already saw that. I already learned about that because it was all in the same format. But if you come up with something that works, like what Jen you know, just demoed for us, you know, I just think kind of like slotting it in certain places and just not doing it over and over and over and over again, because that's when you'll lose people. Trisha, I don't know if you're on, if you have any other thoughts on that. And if you're talking, you're on mute.
I was muted. Yeah, absolutely. Just the way that the same way that, you know, at Lockheed, they had you have a number of expected regular communications that are set up. People are trained to look for that and to look for a certain kind of information in that. So you can train people to look for that kind of information. And then occasionally you got to wake them up with a video. And so it really is, I mean, just like in art, right? You've got, you know, in classic composition in art, I am not an artist, but part of, you know, classic composition in art is repetition and then breaking that repetition. And we got to do the same thing when we communicate.
Right.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have a question here we'll take with Stacy, and then we'll go into our other room where we'll be able to unmute ourselves and have more of an engaging conversation. So Stacy, we have a question here. I'm wondering what kind of engagement you get from these different modes of outreach, anecdotally, at least. And particularly, I would, and this question is, would you be willing to share your templates for your job aids, email, PowerPoint template, et cetera? I'd love to see them, the toolkit idea for champions and managers. And so some information about maybe how people would get in touch with you if they want to learn more would be helpful there too.
Yeah, thank you, Ernie. So engagement. So, you know, as Jack had mentioned during the session, you know, one of the things we engage is we compare what our click rate is compared to other voluntary type videos, which we are second. So with the CEO first and us becoming second, that clearly is one method that we're trying to have a barometer on. Otherwise, the method of engagement, sometimes, you know, we've received some feedback through surveys and through other ways of more formalized channels, like through our integrity champions and making sure that we get feedback from them. And then also with our senior leaders and with our management. So we do have different ways that we can pull some of their responses to understand. From there, it is the actors and actresses. We also, go back to them and say, what kind of response are you getting? You know, we often give them a hard time saying, you know, make sure you wear your sunglasses tomorrow now that you're a movie star. And, you know, they do have some fun with that too. So we do get some ways of receiving feedback on it, but we have not started doing a survey across our employee population yet. That is something that Jack and I are starting to talk about as far as what other KPIs can we incorporate, how else can we measure and have metrics around some of our campaigns that we're doing, and, you know, be able to set some of those barometers. So yeah, and I'd be happy to connect with anyone offline if they would like to talk more about some of the materials that we are producing and stuff. I have to admit, I know we have them in the slide deck, but I have to check with my legal department whether I can actually share, and maybe that's something that we work closely with ECI and see if there's a way we can share it through ECI. So, but Jack and I'll take that offline with you probably, Ernie. And Jack, is there anything else that you want to add on that?
You're on mute, Jack.
Yeah, you know, I think the question about effectiveness and impact is one that has haunted the profession for many, many, many years. And I think oftentimes as an industry, we've tried to find that elusive silver bullet, and I don't think it exists. I think it's an amalgamation of activity that you would show the Department of Justice, how this tool fit in to a host of other tools and ways you try to communicate and train employees. You know, we're toying with maybe a 2-question survey at the end of the video, right? Was this valuable for you? And would you like to see more of this type of, you know, story? In a sense of, you know, at the very minimum, if people say, yes, this was valuable time for me to spend in front of my computer, 3.5 minutes, and I'd like to see more like this, it kind of validates the theory. So we're talking about, you know, that as a potential means of feedback. But I think, you know, if you haven't been in front of the Department of Justice or the SEC on a compliance matter, I congratulate you. I have been. What we've tried to do in those engagements is tell a holistic story about everything that we're doing within the sentencing guidelines. And, you know, we tried to follow that Morgan Stanley drama. And, you know, for us, it worked. But I do think we need to have a little bit more focus on potential impact and desire to see more.
Great, thank you, Jack. And so we have been tracking our chat, and Alyssa, our events manager, tells me that we will have that available over in the other room so we can continue the conversation. And where I'd like that conversation to begin, actually, and Andrea and Nicole, is around effectiveness. I'd be curious about any suggestions that you have around measuring the effectiveness of communications, some things that you think are novel. Also, I'd be interested in from our audience and hearing from them how they measure effectiveness. And then we'll see where the conversation takes us. So why don't we convene on the flip side? What you need to do is to leave this particular room and you'll go back to the platform and then click on the fishbowl icon there, and you will be admitted to the fishbowl room. And so thank you all very much. We hope that you will all be able to stay with us. If you can't, well, we appreciate you being with us for this best practice forum. We know you have a lot of choices in terms of where you spend your time and your energy, and we hope this has been valuable to you. So let's go over into the fishbowl room. So if all the panelists will exit and the attendees, and then we'll re-enter there. Thank you.